uh, as we get into this is that when I was 20 years old, life was really good. I had just graduated from our local university. I became engaged to marry my wife. Life was indeed very good. There's one evening I will never forget. I was playing foosball with my college buddies when a friend came up to me and said, Bobby, your dad is in the emergency room. He had a heart attack. So we rushed to the hospital, and upon seeing me, my mom quickly got up as our family doctor was walking toward us. He drew in a deep breath and said, I couldn't save you. My mom and I were absolutely stunned. In an instant, I became the leader of our small 5 employee business. Soon I discovered we were $70,000 in debt, and our gross revenue was about $90,000. Not good. Financially, we were way upside down. I was in crisis mode every day, much like what we are all experiencing today during these challenging health and economic times. However, we survived, then thrived, and ultimately grew to over 150 employees. Through the tough times, I learned that everyone can build a successful life, business, and or church by applying one simple formula: mind times heart equal will. Now, before we get into more about that, I would like to uh, just share with you, which I think probably everyone on this phone call are experiencing today, and that is the enormous amount of this disruptive change that's occurring in our life, in our business, even at our church, and also the massive amount of unknowns. I mean, even the experts can't give us a good answer about how to deal with a lot of the unknowns. They keep changing. So we are all, every one of us, I'm almost sure, have experienced something with all of this massive change. Let's take about if it's your personal life. You know, you may have a family member that's going to graduate from high school. That's changed, or college. You may also have someone that in your family are trying to set up the wedding, but that keeps moving. You've got children maybe at home, and because the schools are closed. You know, just after over 8 weeks, I finally this Saturday got a haircut. I mean, I felt like I was back in the 70s with the length of my hair. But we are all been experiencing this shelter in place. We're probably are making more purchases online, and it just keeps going on and on and on. But in your business, those of y'all that are business leaders, you got people working remotely. You're dealing as a leader is how should I make the place of business safe so the employees feel comfortable to return. You got these questions about testing. Some businesses are dealing with loans. What's going to happen there? What's going to happen about paying the bills, lost customers? And most of all is how can we take from here, increase revenue, decrease expenses, and increase productivity with all of these things that are going on. And even at your church, many churches are struggling with how do we, how can we do our worship online, and how can we still online stay connected with our members? But also some churches are dealing with a substantial decline in their donations, and And how do we deal with a decline in membership, perhaps? What do you do with the members that are in an aging group that are need to be, they at the moment you might not be able to, want to encourage them to come to church. So if you got a drop in donations, you may be looking at cutting staff, cutting wages, and it just goes on and on and on with all of the struggles with this massive, enormous, disruptive change that is taking place in our lives right now. And what I like to do is share my screen is this change curve. If you notice across the bottom, it has the arrow pointing about time, over time. Over on the left, it's talking about your self-esteem, your ability to cope with, and productivity. And because of this huge disruptive change that's occurring in our life, and all of us are in different stages at the moment. If you're in stage one still, since probably mid-March, you may be still in the area of shock, denial, and angry. And it may be, you may be in stage two with resistance, or you're searching, or some people are working on solutions. But, it's also interesting how many people recycle back through some of these from like resistance back to anger or something like that as well. But let me just share this with you. What I'm finding is many of us, all this enormous disruptive change are things that are occurring outside of us. And, but to be honest, is that we can't control what's going on outside of us. What we can control is what's happening inside of us. And they call it outside in. And what we're talking about, there are some people, because of this struggle, depending on where you are in this change curve, is people, I come across people all the time that they're waiting for outside whatever is occurring, that change it has to improve before you improve. But it's not, let me just share this, it's not what happens to us, it's what's happened in us. And what happens in us will define is how we respond to what is happening to us. And that is a very important thing for us to understand that. Now, the other thing is that, let me just share this with you. Everything begins with a thought. So it has to do with our mind, and our mind is the battleground that's occurring right now. It's almost like, if you can think of at the top of two mountains, one is one commander that is driven by fear, and you got another commander on the other top of the mountain, and it's empowered by faith. And there's a battleground right in the middle of these two mountaintops. And these two commanders of their armies are about ready to battle right there in the battlefield. You might ask, well, which one is going to win? Well, it's the one that you feed the most. And I come across so many people that are so focused on all of their energy and effort is looking at what they can't control externally, and they lose sight that the things that they can control is what's happening inside of them. So I think that we all are experiencing this change. This is one of the few things, there's probably not a person on this call that has different, have not experienced the change. The other thing I want to share with you is that this is the reason why that I've titled this talk, Outward Success is an Inside Job. And th- what I'm wanting to do today is come beside you, is to help you look at the next normal. In other words, it's time to prepare you for growth. And that's what's one of the most important things I want to share with you. Now, let me share this other matter as well. Today, just be prepared. Is I'm going to be challenging everyone here about how you think. And I truly believe is that when you change how you think, you change what you do, and you change who you are, which is what's inside of you. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen at the moment. And what I like to do is, you'll see this flip chart behind me. And if you will raise your hand, if you would mind participating with us. But what I like for you, I'd like for a couple people to comment on, from kindergarten through high school, who was your favorite teacher or coach? And I like to know who they were, why they were your favorite, and how did it impact you on in the classroom and perhaps your life, and how did it impact you if it's on with the sports team. So with that, Brady, you want to?
Yeah, Bobby, what we can do is whoever would like to share can just put their cursor on their Zoom window on their computer, and they'll see in the lower left where they can unmute themselves and share about their favorite teacher or coach.
All right, let's before they speak up, Brady, if you'll recognize who they are.
Well, we don't have a lot of video going on, Bobby, so just when you share, identify who you are as you share about your favorite teacher or coach.
Okay. Well, somebody, if you'll look in the bottom, if you're at your computer, the bottom left-hand corner where it says you're currently mute, you can stop the mute there to comment.
Just by clicking on that little icon.
Yes. Mark? Hey, Mark, is that you?
Yes, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, sure can.
I'm Mark Chastain hailing to you from Atlanta, Georgia.
Ah, hey.
Yep. Mrs. Winter in Wheeler High School was one of my all-time favorite teachers. She was an English literature teacher, very, very hard on us with papers and doing things over and over and over. But then when you got it right, you really knew that you knew something. And she always promised that when we went to college, we would realize what a great teacher she was, and she was right. So, but she constantly just pushed us, a little bit more, a little bit better. And her whole idea was that it wasn't going to, in life, we would end up rising above other people if we just kept that attitude in our forefront. And it started in her classroom.
Yeah, so how did it impact you in the classroom?
Yes, big impact in the classroom, big impact in life. You just do a little bit more and you'll find yourself ahead of everybody else.
Man, that teacher really was an encourager. So thank you, Mark, for your comments there. Let's someone else, please.
Sure, this is Dave. I'm in Denver.
Yeah, hey, Dave.
I'm sorry. This is Gabriel in Denver. My apologies. Um, so I had a physics teacher who, in high school, it really encouraged us to learn and grow in areas that were outside of physics. He wasn't really just teaching physics. He was teaching personal life skills, personal management, eating habits, food combining, all kinds of fun stuff that you wouldn't expect just a teacher to teach. But he was definitely my favorite teacher because he taught us life skills that a lot of us hadn't heard of before, hadn't seen before, about personal management, personal responsibility.
Man, I like that. And so how did it impact you in that classroom?
For me, I think he really taught me that, I'm the master of my journey, and that or that I have control over my journey. I don't need to necessarily be controlled by other people's emotions or feelings or directions. That we could develop our own path, and the discipline of following that path leads to the rewards. But the discipline is where the key is. You just can't decide to do it tomorrow and then everything changes. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave. Dave, I really appreciate those are excellent comments. Can we get one more? Can we get one more?
Hello, Bobby.
Hi.
This is Tim Burney, Wichita Falls, Texas.
Hey, Tim.
Man, I was reluctant to switch on here because everybody has these great stories, but I wasn't a model student by any means. So I guess my favorite teacher, she didn't really teach me anything. So we're gonna go in a little different direction here by trying to buck the system my whole life and get away with what I wanted to. My favorite teacher, she taught Spanish, and I wasn't very good at Spanish, and she pretty much just let me do whatever I want. And by my charisma and my charming personality, I got away with really not doing anything in there, which was a downfall of my whole life story. Just
Yeah.
trying to hustle people, which I look back and say, man, what a mistake that was growing up that way. But that was, my favorite teacher because, I could go in there and just really do whatever I want and get away with it,
Yeah. Well, I can understand that. And I'm gonna I'm gonna come back to you, Tim, here. You don't have to comment again, but there's another piece to this exercise, and I want to bring that back up. And let's do this. Is there one other person that minds sharing about their favorite teacher or coach through your early school years? I think I hear somebody. Okay, well, we'll go to the next, and Tim, I'm going to pick up where you left off, because the other exercise is, who was your worst teacher or coach? And I'm going to modify what you were saying. Who were they? Why? And how did it impact you in the classroom? And Tim, I'm going to put you in that category, even though you enjoyed her, but overall, the way it led you in your life is she was actually your worst teacher, and it did impact you the way you lived your life. So how about someone else that want to share who your worst teacher or coach? And those that have already spoken up, you can speak up again, because if you got a good one, you got a bad one. So,
all right. This is Gabriel in Denver again.
Hi. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have another Zoom call that I go by a pseudonym of Dave, so I apologize. I was on that earlier. So this is Gabriel. I'm in Denver. So one of the worst teachers I had was was close to the same schedule, actually, close to the same time of life. That teacher was forceful, just gave us gave us handouts and said, this is the way it is. Because I said so, that's the way it is. That's the way it always is. And I'm right, you're wrong. I actually got a fist fight with him about authoritarianism. He's like, we should have a police officer on every corner. I said, well, that doesn't really work out so well. Well, then, what's to stop me from stealing your shirt? And he came over and I decked him. But that was a pretty bad teacher because he was just forcefully, he wasn't really helping us discover anything. He wasn't helping us grow and learn. He was just force feeding the information.
Yeah, well, we can probably guess, but how did it impact you in your class?
Well, I ended up being expelled from school for that one.
Oh, man, this is a good example.
Yeah. And in a number of ways, it's like, I bucked the system and I paid the consequences of getting too emotional and too upset with a situation that I didn't have to fight about. It wasn't really necessary. So a lot of lessons there, a lot of lifelong lessons there.
Yeah, it sounds like it, Gabriel. Thank you for sharing that. That was fun to hear that. So, how about one other person on the worst teacher or coach?
This is Diane. I'll talk about that.
All right.
Actually, one of my worst teachers was a teacher that was pretty well respected overall, and a lot of people thrived in his classroom, but I didn't. And it was his teaching style and somewhat my inability to adapt, perhaps, but also his inability to recognize how he also needed to adapt. And it just has always stood out in my mind. I actually was a transfer student in the middle of my sophomore year, and I had excellent grades. I was an excellent student. And I didn't feel he took the time to really understand that if I wasn't successful there, yet he had my record of success, that he wasn't there to kind of work with me to understand that differently as I was seeking out tutors and things that I'd never done before in my life. So in a way, it was a growth experience because I was humbled by having to be challenged differently, but I really would have expected a teacher in that situation with a transfer student who he had records of knowing I had performed differently in the past would have addressed that differently as well. So it's always just kind of stuck with me, I guess.
Well, thank you, Diane. I really, appreciate y'all's sharing here because it didn't really, to be honest with you, it didn't surprise me, and it's exactly what I thought you would probably. And what I'd like to do right now is share on my screen something that that it's a fruit tree. Now, earlier I mentioned about the one simple formula of mind times heart equal will. And let me just share this with you is, if we take starting with the mind, is before a farmer plants a fruit tree, he spends a great amount of time and effort by faith to prepare and cultivate the soil. The soil represents people. It's the roots of the fruit tree represents the mind, and where everything begins with a thought. If we nurture our mind and guard it from destructive inputs, we improve our thinking. Now, the roots are defined by four important questions. Four important questions is, who are you? your core values. Why do you exist? That's your purpose. Where are you going? Your vision. What do you want to accomplish every day? And that is your super objectives. And in some organizations or in your life, you may call it your mission. Now, the farmer spends years of watering and feeding the roots to the fruit tree. And by faith, a strong, sturdy tree trunk develops where all of the nutrients flow through from the roots to the branches and the leaves. Now, a sound mind leads to a healthy heart. A healthy heart is our tree trunk, which improves our well-being and guides us to treat people with care and respect, allowing our leadership and influence to grow. Our trunk is strengthened by applying specific leadership principles that I teach that touch our hearts and the hearts of the people. Now, if you look at the wheel, is after 2.5 years of watering, which is challenging to even understand when a farmer, when you plant a fruit tree, it takes normally 2 to 5 years to grow fruit. Now, if you even, it can be longer if all you did, you put a seed in the ground, it could maybe take up to 10 years to grow fruit. So after 2 to 5 years of watering, cultivating, pruning, the farmer by faith grows a healthy tree, which in turn produces fruit. The beautiful, delicious fruit is the result of the farmer's labor. So our mind and our heart combine to form our will, creating a deep desire to grow and thrive, which can produce exponential results and lasting success. And one thing I've learned is that if there is a will, there is a way. So the key to this tree illustration is that your life, business, or church, in those, you can enjoy a bountiful harvest, just like the farmer does. Now, if I can just kind of talk a little bit more about this tree, if you notice that the reason why the farmer spends so much time dealing with the soil to prepare for the tree is that he or she knows that if this tree has an excellent root system, it will produce these beautiful fruit eventually. What I find is that, the trunk is basically effective leadership. But it's interesting, the farmer's focus is on the process of growing a healthy tree. They're not focused on the results, which is producing fruit. And that is an important principle to understand, is to be very focused on the process versus so focused on the results. Now, I'm not talking about that you still have set some goals, but the main focus is on the process. And what I have found is that in your life, because this will is so strong, is you will have a bountiful harvest of beautiful, delicious fruit. Now, in an organization, be it business or a church, we're talking about culture. Now, often I get asked the question, what is culture? Well, there's some formal definitions out there that will, be honest with you, will just totally confuse you. But what I've learned is culture is the fruit and not the goal. And I find so many organizations have declared their culture as the goal. And what I mean by that, they think in their mind that if all we do is, like bring in ping pong tables, provide free food and beverage for whatever the people want, and is that it eventually it produces this wonderful culture, but it really doesn't. And when it doesn't, these organizations, they even pour on more things to try to get the people to be more productive, because that's what they want. Now, let me just suggest this. Trying to define culture is so challenging, and the best way I can describe it is you'll know it when you see it. And what I'm getting at here, it's kind of, you know, I live in Texas. I do a lot of bicycling, and I'm always sensitive about the direction and the velocity of the wind. And I've been bicycling for many, many years. And so I actually bicycled this morning, and going out, wouldn't you know it, my east route was directly into the east wind. It was pretty challenging this morning. But the thing is, has anybody seen the wind? No, nobody's ever seen the wind. Now, if we went outside, because I live in Texas and the wind blows a lot, is that you would see the bushes shaking, you would see the leaves shaking in the trees. What you do, you see the effects of the wind blowing, but you don't see the wind. And culture is a lot like the wind. You just don't flat out don't see it until the fruit comes from that culture. And I saw in my own company is what in human resource terms, they call it discretionary effort. I saw with my own eyes, people, what that means, discretionary effort, giving over and above what was required of them. And what we're talking about here, people come to work every day with passion, enthusiasm, and excitement, and you can't buy that stuff. You cannot buy it. But what is a farmer going to do? They're not going to sit there and they're looking at their beautiful fruit just hanging in the tree. No, they're going to go do something. And they're going to take this fruit to the market. If it's you as an individual, you just have this burning desire, a fire in your stomach that you got to go serve somebody. If you are a business, when you go to markets, you're going to obtain extraordinary, not ordinary, extraordinary results. If you're in the church world, is that when you produce this beautiful fruit, it will go out from the outside of the walls of the church to increase God's kingdom. So I share this with you because it plays such an important role. Now, one thing, if I can, this is another thing I want to share with you, but one other thing about that fruit tree, and you remember earlier I mentioned about process. One thing I've learned, and this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but one thing I learned after many years being the CEO of a business is that I began to trust the process. And so I stayed so focused on that because it just like I couldn't do more. I had a desire to, it seems like I could do more focus. The more I focus on the process, it wasn't like sometimes, it always produced extraordinary results. And that's the reason why it's so important, because a farmer is very focused on the process of growing a healthy fruit tree and trusting that if he does that, all the right things, it will produce beautiful fruit. Now, let's tie back to what I said earlier about dealing with a change in our life. It's not, what happens to me, it's what happens in me. And that's the reason why I ask y'all some examples about your favorite teacher and your worst teacher, because look, just listen, just hear you express what was the difference. It had to do what was inside of that teacher, their character qualities. And that's what was the impact that that teacher had on you and on your life. It was happening, what was happening on the inside, not what happened to you. And that's the reason why that is so important. I show this organizational hierarchy. I also call it, a roadmap. And I notice, you'll see over here on the right, I have working on the business. You could change the words between working on your life, or you could say working on the church versus working in the business. You could change the word there at the bottom there to working in your life or working in the church. And see, what I find is that 85% of the leaders this is where they spend down here in the bottom on the tactical plans and the measurable goals. This is where they spend their time.
Bobby,
And
we're
yes.
still on the fruit tree.
Huh. All right. Is it still?
Yes. Maybe unshare, and then reshare, selecting that other.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Sorry that you weren't seeing this, but this is when I was talking about working on the business or working on your life or working on your church. And then down here at the bottom, working in your business or working in your life or working in the church. So down here on the tactical plans and measurable goals, this is what I was talking about, that 85% of the leaders, this is where they spend most of their time. So that leaves only 15% of the leaders that I have observed are working on the business while they work in the business. Or you could just change out the word, working on their life while they work in the business. It's not either or, it's both, on and in. And I show this to you because this little circle of right here by core values, purpose, vision, super objectives, or mission, and plus effective leadership. This ties into the mind times heart equal will, because I call these the 5 essentials. And you've got to have this. But let me just say this. I mentioned earlier about the roots and the fruit tree. Just knowing the core values, purpose, and the vision, and the super objectives or mission, just knowing them is not enough. It takes effective leadership to touch the hearts of the people. And so what I've learned is that when I spend a great deal amount of time in this area working on the business, because it's a process, it never stops. It's also, it's more, if in your personal life, it's who you are becoming. Or if it's your organization, it is who you are becoming. Not down here is more working in the business or life or church, is working in the business. And that's what you're very focused on, doing things. But again, it's not either or, it's both. And I've just learned, you all shared some examples that when you get this right up here, it produces extraordinary results. So I'm gonna stop sharing here for just a moment. And one other thing just to bring up is and this ties back to the fruit tree. It also ties back what I just shared. It also ties back to your comments about the favorite teacher and coach and the worst, is that just think about this. Just continuing that thought is about, let's say, is which medical doctor do you go to? The one who is kind and friendly and takes time to be with you, or one who sees you only as a body count to bill for? what dentist do you go to? The one who is pleasant and fun to be around and takes time to answer your questions, or the one that the one that treats you like a number of long line of molars and mouths? And in your organization, for example, what accountant do you go to? The one who has strong work ethic and a great encourager to, his coworkers, or the one that hits the door at 5 o'clock, regardless if they're peak times or doesn't appreciate those that work for them? What about a service worker in your organization? Which service worker do you retain during times when it's lean, like we're experiencing right now, this challenge of health and the economy? Is the one with a positive attitude, open and willing to help, or the one who is inflexible and not willing to admit mistakes? So one thing else, if I can share with you, and it has to do with just in a strategic way about what it means working on your life, on your business, or on your church. And there's 3 pieces of this. It's to grow yourself, grow your people, and then your life can grow, your business can grow, and your church will experience growth. But let me just share this illustration here. There's a story about a pumpkin farm. And when he recently, he had this huge field, and he was walking out there on he was just so happy to be walking on his field. And the leaves were beautifully green, and there were little acorns popping up. And you know what amazed him is right in the middle of his field, there was a mason jar laying. Now, you can probably figure he was like, where did this come from? Did it just fall out of the sky? And so just, his curiosity got to him. And so he just took one of those small little acorns and stuck it inside of the mason jar and then walked off. Well, months later, when it was getting close to harvest time and he was walking his field again and again, they were like, like I mentioned, a beautiful, delicious, pumpkins out there in the field. And he was, boy, you talking about a happy guy. And so, but he happened to just walk in the field. He happened to look down and he saw the mason jar, but it still had this small, what was the acorn, but it was a small pumpkin on the inside. And it really startled him that the mason jar placed the limitation on the size of the pumpkin. Now, the story of what that relates to is our life is going to be limited based on how strongly that we have personal growth. Our business is going to be the size of us. Our church, if you're the church leader, the church is only going to be the size of you. And so that's another important element or principle to understand. Now, before we conclude here, if I could suggest this, is to write down just one idea that you've gained from being here today. And I'm so appreciative of everyone being here. And but let me just share in just bringing into, to conclusion is that between 2005 and 2011, the year I sold my business to a publicly traded company, I fully integrated the mind times heart equal will formula in my business. This created revenue and profit growth, get this, 500% during one of the most challenging economic periods of our lifetime. And today we face new challenges. But I am confident that the mind times heart equal will formula is the secret to our future success, because outward success is an inside job. Now, one thing I'd like to share with you is that anyone that would be interested, and let me share my screen. Anyway, one thing I want to share with you is anyone that would be interested over between now and the end of next week, I'll be happy to schedule with you a free, what I call free Leadership Edge coaching call. It'll be for 45 minutes. And you can simply email me at bobby@bobbyalbert.com. And I'll be glad to. The purpose of the call is for you to bring whatever problem or issue that you're dealing with, and I'll be glad to work with you and go through that problem and help you come up with a solution for it. And so I wanted to share that with you, that and with that, let's open up for Q&A. And if you would mind, over in the chat window is to, Brady's going to watch for anyone that has a question. And if you mind asking, you feel free to ask, anything that, and I'll do the best I can to answer it.
Hey,
Brady,
Bobby,
yeah,
can you hear me?
yeah, sure can.
Okay. Hey, I was just wondering, I was in a different meeting, and so I missed about the first half of your presentation. Is this going to be recorded and I can go catch the first part?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question, and it is recorded. So we'll get that out to you, Brady. I don't know when you have that plan, but I'm gathering it's going to be pretty soon.
Yes, sir.
Brady put in the chat window is my email address. See, we have from Mark. Here's the question: is how do you help people focus on growing the healthy tree and the fruit, and what are the typical roadblocks? Now, that's a pretty challenging question. Is a lot has this really kind of through the process is how you grow the healthy tree in your organization. Mark is starting with your core values, purpose, vision, and super objectives and mission. Let me just one thing. I appreciate your question, because there is one thing, if I could encourage you as a takeaway today, is because of trying to prepare for the next normal, and that to prepare you for your future growth, one of the easiest thing for you to do is all of the issues you're dealing with in your organization is to engage your employees. And what I mean specifically is get them involved in the decision-making process. And if I could suggest this, the best thing to do, Mark, is that you get them involved at the beginning of the process, not at the end of the process, and before you have made up your mind. because I had to learn that hard truth going all the way back to 1989. And it was a truth that I didn't like. And when it was revealed to me, be honest with you, it made me mad. But when I began, that was so built into our culture, especially in the area of working in the business. Our people were heavily, heavily involved to participate in the decision making. That when I sold a company, you could walk around the building and the property, and our people would talk to you as though they own the company and not Bobby Albert. And you can't go by that. And so that's one of the simple things, if I could suggest today, is engaging your people, get them in, participate in the decision with all of these changes that's you're faced with in your business. Because I find so many leaders are going down the path of what I call, it's one of two problems, is the Lone Ranger path. And it's not good for the leader, neither is it good for the employees. Now, hopefully I helped there with some of the roadblocks, but I think what my experience is, and by the way, if I can say this about engaging the employees in the decision making, Gallup survey did a massive survey of over 1 million employees and over 80,000 companies. And one of the 5 things that they found was that employees were asking, can I contribute toward the goals of the organization? And that's a key piece here. Anybody else got a question? Well, we've been on this call up to about an hour, and I appreciate everybody's time today. And I am so thrilled with all the people that registered for this and to participate. Those y'all that commented, even shared something in the chat window, I'm very appreciated at that. And Brady, anything else to conclude with?